Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a truly absurd climb that I had in the Open Great League. 3 days ago, I was at 2600 elo. Today, I'm at 2995 elo, and I'm number 2 in the entire world on the Go Battle League leaderboards. Now, unfortunately, I did fall just short of becoming this season's first legend. That honor goes to Unhelper. However, interestingly enough, Unhelper and I were actually using the same team for the final push, so the number 1 and number 2 ranked players in the entire world were both using the team that I'm showcasing today. This team features Tinkaton as the lead, Furret as the safe switch, and Guzzlord, a very powerful core breaker, as the closer. Hopping to the first match, we pick up a very strong lead Tinkaton into the Shadow Malamar. Malamar will do what they do best, go for the superpower and dip, but my opponent safe switches into their own Tinkaton, and this could be very problematic. My backline is very weak to Tinkaton. I'm able to successfully bait with the Bulldoze, and I'm going to be full sending Gigaton Hammer. I need damage on this Pokemon. Gigaton Hammer is going to be double shielded. My opponent is making the read that I'm weak to Tinkaton in the back, and they are 100% correct. Even though Bulldoze will not knock out here, I cannot afford to no shield, because a Bulldoze and a debuff could potentially set me up to get Fairy Winded down. They fire off back-to-back Bulldozes. I'm going to wait the turn, they pivot out, they send in the Shadow Malamar, but unfortunately the Psywaves are adding up onto my lower defense, so I'm forced to Gigaton Hammer and take the KO. So Malamar has been removed from the field, but my opponent still has a lot of health remaining on that Tinkaton. They're probably going to look to send it back in, and when they do, I'm going to bank some energy and then bring in Furret. Furret doesn't have a good matchup in a Tinkaton, but at the very least, I can lower their defense with Brick Break and hit for neutral damage. Gigaton connects, Furret gets absolutely rocked, but the fact that I can absorb Gigaton and not get farmed down is a very big plus. This Brick Break debuff is going to be critical. Suddenly, with the debuff applied, my opponent will actually be knocked out by a Bulldoze from my Tinkaton, and I should only be 1 Fairy Wind away. So, my Furret will get KO'd, but I'm feeling like I'm in a pretty good spot here. I'm going to wait down the timer. Now I can send back in the Tinkaton, go for the Bulldoze. My opponent makes a catch onto Jellicent, but oh boy, do we have a Pokemon for Jellicent in the back. Bulldoze does get the debuff. Realistically, that debuff is not going to matter. I can rebank the Bulldoze, send in the Guzzlord, and it just simply does not matter what Jellicent does here. Shadow Ball, Surf, neither charge attack is going to be doing basically any damage. My Brutal Swing, however, is easily going to be taking the knockout, and the fact that I have a Bulldoze banked on my Tinkaton guarantees the win. My opponent has to leave with a Bulldoze loaded to win charge attack priority, but that means they can never throw Gigaton Hammer at the Guzzlord. Their only win condition is to Fairy Wind me into Bulldoze range, but before they can get there, I'm just able to make too many Brutal Swings. The spam of Guzzlord is unreal. Brutal Swing KOs the Tinkaton, and we take the Game 1 win. Hopping into game number 2, we pick up a bit of an awkward lead Tinkaton into Shadow A-Slash. A-Slash just have a pretty big pacing advantage here. Drill Run will hit for big super effective damage, but the good news for me is I can always survive one Drill Run. So I'm going to be no shielding, immediately going for Gigaton Hammer, and this is going to guarantee almost their entire health bar or shield advantage. Shield advantage it is, and now I get to send in Furret. My opponent will always fire off energy before I'm able to get the Brick Break. Brick Break is now the standard moveset on Furret in the Great League, so trainers are realistically never going to give you an opportunity to throw it. My opponent now sends in Mantine. Mantine is just a very bulky Pokemon, so it's a very effective damage sponge. I have a ton of energy on the Furret, but unfortunately it looks like even 2 Swifts are not going to be enough to secure the knockout. This is a pretty nice bait out for me, because Guzzlord doesn't have an amazing matchup into Mantine either. However, my opponent desyncs the switch timers, which means I can bank the energy, switch into the Tinkaton, and catch the Twister where it is going to be triple resisted. That Twister does less than nothing. Back in comes the Sandslash, and Sandslash will try and force a charge attack priority tie. But I don't think Bulldoze will be enough to KO the Sandslash from here, so I shield up the Drill Run, and I decide I'm going to be full sending Gigaton. I want to guarantee the knockout here. I do not want them to survive. Gigaton Hammer is going to connect, and Sandslash will get KO'd. In the back is Seaking, and if there's a single Great League Pokemon more underwhelming than Seaking, I have yet to meet it. Gigaton Hammer does 60% of its health as a resisted move, and now I can just switch in the Guzzlord. Seaking just simply does not have the stats to compete in my eyes. Even though Seaking does have really nice coverage and pretty solid pacing, it doesn't get same type attack bonus, and its stats just really don't hold up. My opponent now sends in Mantine. Mantine can't make a Twister either. The fact that we caught all their energy earlier just completely sinks them. Seaking is just going to keep farming. I try for a fancy catch, I don't get it, but I have a charge stack on the Guzzlord and a charge stack on the Furret, so either way the game is over. We don't lose to Seaking in this household. Guzzlord takes the knockout and gets the win. We move to the next match, picking up an amazing lead, leading Tinkaton into Florges. My opponent safe switches into Hisuian Electrode, and Guzzlord is about to absolutely feast. Guzzlord is a complete wall to energy from Hisuian Electrode. One of the reasons why Guzzlord is so strong right now is there's a lot of Pokemon that just have absolutely no coverage into it. We're talking the Kanto Ninetales of the world, the Hisuian Electrodes of the world. It's a very similar reason why I ended up trying Shadow Giratina. Guzzlord offers a lot of those same really helpful resistances. Brutal Swing will take the knockout, back in comes Florges, and for matchups like these, having Sludge Bomb is very nice. Sludge Bomb hits for huge damage on the Florges. Florges will get a farm down, and now I can bring back in the Tinkaton. My opponents can reveal their final Pokemon is the aforementioned Shadow Kanto Ninetales, so baiting out the Guzzlord is something they absolutely had to do. But even with the Guzzlord out of the way, I just simply don't believe they have enough in the tank to be able to sweep me with the Ninetales. I'm going to go for the Brick Break. My opponent's going to have to shield everything, but I just want to start ramping up the Sucker Punch damage. Suddenly, the Ninetales is getting lower and lower. The Sucker Punch damage feels so incredibly oppressive. I will lose Charge Attack priority, but as long as I can get their final shield down, my opponent will realistically have no win condition. They're probably going to try and go for a snipe play with the energy that's banked on the Florges, so I'm just going to pivot out, read the switch in, and get the catch. My Furret has been preserved. Florges did just go for the Chilling Water, but now I can just look to massively overfarm with the Tinkaton and fire off Bulldoze. Bulldoze is definitely not taking the knockout, but my goal is I just want to guarantee that I can exit with a Bulldoze loaded. Even if it's a -2 Bulldoze, it will still be valuable super effective damage onto the Ninetales. My switch timer will be up, and then I can bring in the Furret, and Furret's going to get some nice Sucker Punches onto the Ninetales. -2 Bulldoze is going to connect. They do get the defense drop, we farm down with Sucker Punches, and we take the win. Picking up a really bad lead in the next match, leading Tinkaton into Kanto Ninetales. I save switch into Furret, and my opponent doesn't have a clear answer, so they stay in to fire off Weather Ball. Weather Ball will do some pretty sizable chip damage, and my opponent sends out Jumpluff. This is a really nice bait out. Jumpluff would be an absolute disaster for my Guzzlord to deal with, and I can just apply a lot of charge stack pressure onto this Jumpluff and pressure them into throwing energy early. Jumpluff goes for the Energy Ball. Energy Ball will miss the knockout, and that means I'm able to get a second Swift. This is guaranteed put them into Gigaton Hammer range, and now I can just look to overfarm a lot with the Tinkaton. Because Tinkaton really does not care about what damage it takes from a Jumpluff. Jumpluff can't really hit for any kind of meaningful damage here, even if it is the Shadow. Acrobatics lands, that's not a problem whatsoever. I farm up to just shy of 100 energy and fire off the Gigaton. Gigaton easily going to be taking the knockout, and then I have to trust in Guzzlord to take home the win. In comes Guzzlord, they pivot out, it's Shadow Malamar in the back, and Guzzlord is back to core breaking. This game is over, there's nothing my opponent can do. Guzzlord is just simply too strong. Guzzlord lands the Brutal Swing. Opponent going to be returning fire here. I'm always going to be double shielding. They do actually full send the superpower, but even if they had baited, as long as I double shield, my opponent's never making it to a third charge attack. So I'm very happy to double shield as they fire off yet another superpower. They can switch back out instead of the Kanto Ninetales, but even as the Shadow Kanto Ninetales, they just don't have the damage output to ever get through this Guzzlord. Brutal Swing is going to be no shielded. That's so much health lost. They have a ton of energy on the Ninetales. They're finally going to get to unleash it here. Ninetales will go for the Energy Ball. It does do more damage than a Weather Ball. Even if they go for Energy Ball number 2, I still think this misses the knockout. They go for the Energy Ball. Guzzlord survives. Guzzlord gets the full farm down. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We pick up a pretty negative lead in the next match, leading Tinkaton into Empoleon. I decided to stay in this matchup and play it out for just a little bit. To start the game there, I don't know if you noticed, very briefly as I tried to click the first Bulldoze, the energy didn't quite load until I had 6 Fairy Winds instead of 5. So that's another weird oddity, I guess, with the new system. Hopefully they're able to get that fixed. That is something that I did report, so hopefully that won't be an issue for much longer. But that was kind of a new issue that I saw. Overall, game state was pretty good today. I alternated between the new system and the old system just because at page 1, it's very difficult to find queues, so I was queuing in whatever league I could find opponents in. My opponent sends Seaking into the Furret, and I've already mentioned it earlier, I am not a fan of Seaking in the Open Great League. I just don't really know what Seaking does. I don't think it does much of anything well. Even with the Furret having already been chipped, Furret's still able to put up so much fight against that Seaking, and now I can bring in the Tinkaton. This allows me to overfarm a decent amount. I can fire off the Bulldoze to deny their Drill Run, and hopefully with Seaking out of the way, Guzzlord is primed to sweep. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon. It's the Ninetales, and Guzzlord is about to sweep another team. Ninetales fires off the Weather Ball. Guzzlord absolutely laughs at that damage. Back in comes the Empoleon to be instantly hit with the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing is going to be no-shielded, and Empoleon hoping to hold on, but they will not. They fall, and now it's Kanto Ninetales versus the world, and it's not even a Shadow Ninetales. There's just nothing this Ninetales can do. Weather Ball lands, Guzzlord does not care, and it's just going to be death by 1,000 Brutal Swings. Brutal Swing after Brutal Swing after Brutal Swing. This poor Kanto Ninetales, there's just not really anything they can even do. I'm pretty close to a move on the Tinkaton as well. So what I should be able to do is just bank energy, pivot into the Tinkaton, and guarantee the win. Had my opponent thrown energy at the Tinkaton, then they wouldn't have been able to make 2 moves into the Guzzlord, which is also 1 off the move. So we end up getting the 5-0 set from 29-11, we end up catching our Gumi, and we're able to claim our first 5-0, which takes us to 29-69 elo. We move to set number 2, picking up a pretty nice lead, Tinkaton into Kingdra. My opponent save switches into Shadow Kanto Ninetales, and man, Kanto Ninetales is a very strong save switch if you don't have a dragon. But I have a Guzzlord on this team, which means I am absolutely feasting on these Ninetales. Brutal Swing lands. They can even fire off back-to-back charge stacks. It can be Energy Ball. It can be Weather Ball. I'm just simply not going to care. Guzzlord is just way too strong here. If my opponent decides to bring back in the Kingdra, Kingdra's going to have a pretty awkward time. My opponent will put up the shield. It looks like they're going to try and make a play for switch advantage. They're going to go for another Weather Ball. That is going to do some decent damage onto the Guzzlord. The Shadow Kanto Ninetales does put up a significantly better fight because Weather Ball just has a lot more damage. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon. It's going to be Empoleon. I'm able to save energy on the Guzzlord and send in Furret. And Furret having access to Brick Break is just so perfect here. Hydro Cannon lands. Furret will not care, and that's going to be a charge attack priority type. Brick Break is definitely something they're going to have to respect. It could set up a farm down if they end up no shielding. They stay in, they take a ton of Sucker Punch damage, and I decide that honestly, Furret has done its job. I can just no shield the Furret, I still have energy stored on the Guzzlord, I fire off the Brutal Swing, my opponent saves the Empoleon and gets a catch onto the Kingdra. A pretty nice play from my opponent, they're able to reset that defense drop, but now I can leverage Tinkaton to be able to sweep this game. My opponent can fire off a Surf. Surf's not really going to be a big problem. I just want to Fairy Wind them into a range where I can take the knockout with the Bulldoze. Well, Bulldoze won't quite knock out from here, but it should at least set up a Fairy Wind farm down. The Bulldoze is going to land. Kingdra able to make a last second charge attack, but I believe they're short. I don't think they have enough for the Surf, so it is just going to be the Swift. Now, I have a ton of energy. My opponent brings back in the Empoleon. Bulldoze will not knock out here. They did reset the defense drop from earlier, but it's just going to be putting them very low. I pivot Guzzlord. They send in the Ninetales. Ninetales is going to be firing off the Weather Ball. This will guarantee my final Protect Shield, but by shielding and clicking Brutal Swing, that's going to guarantee my opponent's energy. They really wanted that energy to go onto the Tinkaton, but by shielding, I can pressure away their energy, send back in the Tinkaton, outpace them, make it to the Bulldoze. We probably could have farmed down in one more Fairy Wind, but I'd rather just guarantee the win. My opponent genuinely played that game extremely well, but we had a pretty big team comp advantage, and we were able to capitalize. We move to the next match, leading Tinkaton into Shadow Annihilate. My opponent actually CMP ties me here on 8. This could actually be the close combat. I put up the shield, and thank goodness I did, as my opponent is a maniac who is running close combat on Annihilate. Bulldoze is going to get the debuff and the shield. My opponent save switches into Dunsparce, and that's a Pokemon I haven't seen for quite some time. The obvious response would be to send in the Furret, but I actually decided to bring in the Guzzlord. The reason being is that I think Guzzlord's energy will be pretty valuable into the Annihilate if they bring it back in. I'm trying to think for the future here. How can I best position myself so when the Annihilate hits the field, I can actually get damage on it? They're going to fire off a Rock Slide after the Drill Run. That's going to put me very low. I'm able to farm up to just shy of 100 energy and then go for the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing is going to be knocking out the Dunsparce. I should be healthy enough that I can survive 2 counters. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon in the back, and it's going to be Unova Stunfisk. I'm going to Brutal Swing and then pivot out into the Furret. I need to bait out the Annihilate. It's the Shadow counter Annihilate as well. These counters are doing some pretty significant damage, and I build up to the Trailblaze. And the bluff works. I'm able to get a shield on what could have only been a Brick Break. This is not enough for a close combat. I believe this can only be a Rage Fist, so I'm going to be no shielding. Unfortunately, the Rage Fist does let them farm down, but I have a ton of energy stored on the Guzzlord, so I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot. My opponent will fire off Mud Bomb. I have to put up the Protect Shield because I need to get damage onto this Stunfisk. Bulldoze will hit them for super effective, and this is a 50-50 shot at a debuff. Even without a debuff, I feel like I'm okay here, but we do end up getting the debuff. So now I feel like I'm in an even better position. I stay in, and the threat of a Bulldoze will force them to go for the Mud Bomb, and then I have all the stored energy on the Guzzlord. Then I can bring back in the Guzzlord, fire off the Brutal Swing. It turns out we won't even need any more damage because they actually just get knocked out by the Brutal Swing, and that's going to be game over. Hopping into the final match, we pick up a bit of an awkward lead, Tinkaton into Mantine. Now, Mantine does actually wall Tinkaton, but Gigaton Hammer is still just such a stupid move that it hits for huge damage anyway. Gigaton lands, they save switch into Shadow Kanto Ninetales, and you can kind of see why this team ended up working so well. People are so used to Kanto Ninetales being hyper flexible, Kanto Ninetales getting up energy, just completely running away with games, because even Pokemon like Diggersby and Unova Stunfisk actually have losing matchups to Kanto Ninetales down energy. But I have a real answer to Kanto Ninetales. I have the Guzzlord. Guzzlord just so dominant here. I can fire off the back-to-back brutal swings. My opponent will put up a shield, and they're going to pivot back into the Mantine. Unfortunately, I was caught mid-Dragon Tail. They're firing off the Twister. I'm forced to put up the shield, and now I'm going to bring in the Tinkaton. I think that having Guzzlord could be pretty valuable, because Guzzlord is at the very least still outside of a range where Weather Ball could take the knockout. They're going to go for the Water Pulse. I'm going to farm up to 100 energy, and then go for Gigaton. Unfortunately, that's a lot of energy down the drain for a pretty low HP Mantine, but Bulldoze would have never taken the knockout. Back in comes the Ninetales. Perfect counting from my opponent. That's going to be a charge stack priority tie. I decide that Tinkaton has done its job. I'm going to be no shielding. Instead, I'm going to bring in Furret. And I'm just going to go for a full farm down. My opponent banks energy in the back. They have Galarian Stunfisk. Stunfisk is an incredibly good Pokemon. If it had been aligned onto any other Pokemon on this team, all would have been lost. But it's aligned onto the one thing on my team that can actually beat it, and that's going to be the Furret. I no shield as they go for the Rock Slide bait. I fire off another Brick Break, and this is guaranteeing the final shield. They're already debuffed. They're now going to be at -2. These Sucker Punches are shredding, and I'm even able to go for a catch onto the Guzzlord. I felt like at this point the win was guaranteed, but look at this. They end up getting the perfect Mudshot farm down, exiting with a ton of energy. This, however, can only be a Rock Slide. I have to trust that this will do less than a Weather Ball. So I no shield. They pivot into the Ninetales. They try and get an Ember down, but they're unable to get it. I put up the shield as they go for the Weather Ball. I have the Brick Break loaded, and that is going to be a win. One thing that I do want to shout out is how well all of my opponents played in this video. Granted, I was playing towards the upper half of page 1, so like top 25 worldwide, so it does make sense that we're going to be encountering some absolutely insane players, but even with some pretty big team comp disadvantages, it shows just at the absolute skill level that these players have, to still be able to make these games so close, despite near monumental team comp disadvantages, as Guzzlord was consistently able to core break teams for me. All in all, this team is a pretty standard ABB style team, and I don't typically end up liking to run ABB style teams. But what this team did allow me to do was run Guzzlord. And I think Guzzlord is incredibly strong. We saw game after game, Guzzlord able to shut down Electrode, do very well into Malamar, obliterate the Kanto Ninetales. Guzzlord's typing is just very valuable defensively right now. It gives you a ton of really nice resistances, and it's a Pokemon that not a lot of people are really preparing for. You could consider Dragon Claw over Sludge Bomb, but I did end up liking Sludge Bomb in case I had a bunch of energy and my opponent sent in a Florges to wall it. Now, Florges has been very common in the 2900s. I imagine that's not going to be the case for every ELO range, but in the ELO range that I'm playing at, Florges is everywhere. So having a charge stack that can get damage onto Florges definitely felt like a must. As far as Furret, I do think Brick Break is non-negotiable. I think Brick Break is definitely the default moveset that you want to run on Furret in the Open Great League now. Brick Break just offers you such nice coverage as a save switch. Obviously, the worst case scenario for Furret would basically be to get stuck on a Tinkaton, where even with Brick Break, you're not really going to be able to do much. But Brick Break does allow you significantly better play into Pokemon like Fortress if your opponent sends in a Corviknight. All those matchups that normally would be pretty catastrophic are suddenly just neutral to winning matchups. So I'm a big believer in Brick Break on Furret. But let's be real, we all know who the real star of the show was on this team, and his name was Guzzlord. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. My analytics say there's a bunch of people who watch the videos every day who have not yet subscribed, so it's worth double checking to make sure that you are subscribed, because subscribing is a great way to let the YouTube algorithm know that you want to see more of this content. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.